Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this webinar, which is hosted by both WorkMotion and Personio. Thank you very much for being here. So today's topic is putting Europe on the map, how to hire and manage remote global talent. Maybe more fundamentally, do we even want to hire remote global talent? Yes or no? So this webinar is to celebrate the integration of WorkMotion and Personio's platforms. So that's great, but don't worry, it's not going to be very marketing heavy. We're here for you, we're not here for ourselves. And I'm talking we, because of course, I'm not alone. We'll do a quick round of introductions, including myself, after just a couple of loose cannons. It's going to last 1 hour and 1 hour sharp. If you'd like to participate in the discussion, we'd be delighted, really happy to hear and answer your questions, or just put in a remark if you have one. You have two options to do it. So I see the comment box is already heavily used, which is great. There you can leave comments. If you'd like to ask a question, you could technically also do it in that box, but we prefer the option ask a question. There should be a button somewhere on your screen that says ask a question. You hit it, and there you can ask a question. It keeps it a little bit more structured to answering them, basically. And then there's two parts to the agenda after the round of introductions, some kind of a small keynote on basically hiring global talent, yes or no, and then a panel discussion with the people that I have here with me today. Round of introductions. I'll start because otherwise it's weird. You've already heard me speaking for a couple of minutes now. My name is Pieter Manden. I'm Dutch, so today is actually King's Day here in Amsterdam. After this session, I have to dress up in something orange and basically party. I'm head of trust and employer compliance at WorkMotion. I used to be director responsible for remote work proposition at PwC. My background is basically that I'm a tax lawyer, but more importantly, a remote work fan. So I have today with me three lovely speakers, and I'd like them to introduce themselves, starting with Sophie.
Thank you, Peter. Hi, all together. I'm Sophie. I'm currently operations and culture at Enpal. It's basically a renewable energy company, a startup which was founded 5 years ago. So we're still in kindergarten with the company, and I'm really looking forward to share how we think about the topic, global talent in general, talent strategies, and where I get the right people from. And looking forward to discuss it with Reece and Bianka.
So, Sophie, maybe before we jump into the other introductions, can you share maybe a little bit on the let's say the global hiring strategy of Enpal already?
Sure. So I think like all the people are facing, or like all the companies are facing while hiring challenges, whether it's shortage or how to get the right talent. Actually, we started as a German company because we were really focused on the German market, on customer side and stuff like that. And then 2020, we introduced our own software and engineering department internally. And then we started actually hiring from different countries and relocating people to Germany. Right now, we're not having any people like working from Spain or different countries for Enpal for like a long time, but with having like actually the possibilities to work abroad for a certain amount of time and thinking about how to deal with it in the future, because we also think it will be a huge topic.
Thank you. Yeah, probably you're not alone in that. Basically, that status quo of deliberating whether or not, and if so, how. Okay, cool. Thank you, Sophie. Bianca.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name is Bianka. I am team lead people operations at Everphone. Everphone was founded in 2016. We are renting out tablets and phones to other companies. So we are completely B2B. And we started hiring, I think about 1 year ago, since we were expanding our business outside of Germany. We started with the US. And since then, we have hired in 4 different countries so far. And yeah, so it's It's going to be more in the future, hopefully. So yeah, the main approach of us using WorkMotion is to expand our businesses in other countries. And of course, labor shortage is also a big topic. But yeah, we're going to speak about that a little bit later, I guess, in more detail. So far. Thank you.
Thank you, Bianca. So you've already hired in 1 year in 4 other countries, basically?
Yes, so mostly in the US, but we have also our CSO, for example, which she is working remotely from Ireland. And we have also hired other salespeople in the Netherlands, in Belgium, and in Switzerland so far.
Wow, that's going fast. Really cool. Thanks, Bianca. And last but not least, my partner in crime from Personio, Reece.
Thanks, Pieter. Good morning, everybody, and welcome. So my name is Reece. I'm the team lead for mobility at Personio. So my team and I look after our international relocations. We manage our business travelers, and we also look after our international remote working policy for all of our workers as well. And I think from Personio's side, our approach is definitely one to embracing global hiring. So to put it in perspective, I think we had about 100 new joiners last month, and on average, about 30 to 35% of our new joiners have some kind of remote or relocation aspect. And generally, that's permanent relocations into our offices, but we also have a fully remote workforce that make up about 10% of our total people. And that can be driven by, the role where we need specific skill sets in specific markets, people who know, the market or speak certain languages, for example. And it can also be driven by, where we have exceptional talent that come across a particular role that isn't necessarily marked as remote, but it makes sense for them. And then it makes sense for us to get them people on board as well, in which case, the relationship that we have with WorkMotion is a key driver in supporting that.
Perfect. Thanks. You said 35% of your new hires has some kind of remote-ish aspect to it. That sounds massive. How many people are we then talking, if I may ask, like on a monthly basis or so?
Yeah, so around 25 people a month probably have some kind of relocation support, whether that's into EU or outside of the EU. It's just obviously a bit more complicated, and that's about a 50-50 split. So it is a lot, but it's very much part of our policy in terms of attracting the right talent as well.
Yeah, apparently, wow, that's a really, really high number. Not only, by the way, the people that have this remote aspect, but also, of course, the total number of people that you're hiring on a monthly basis. That's a great example of like hyper growth. Also very interesting to hear some more about that later throughout this webinar. So thank you for that. I see some other people joined. By the way, whenever you see me looking that way, it's not because I dislike you. I cannot see you anyway. It's because I'm trying to manage 2 screens, which for a guy is already pretty difficult. I see some other people joined. Just welcome to you too. We already did a round of introductions. You can still see the pictures on the screen. If you'd like to participate in a discussion, you're more than welcome. 2 options for that. You have the comment box on the right-hand side, but preferably for a question, you use the Ask a Question functionality. Somewhere in your screen, there's an Ask a Question button. Use it. It'll make it easier for us to manage the questions. So that's the second and last time I said that. Over to the next part. A little bit of a keynote on global hiring because, not only everybody in the Netherlands is dressing up in orange today because of King's Day, there's something else weird going on. And you can see basically the contradiction on this screen. On the left-hand side, global unemployment to reach 207 million in 2022. Global unemployment reaches record high. The United Nations saying the COVID crisis pushes global unemployment indeed to over this 200 million mark in 2022. And world news, global unemployment rate still at record high. Okay. And on the other hand, in blue, there are millions of jobs, but a shortage of workers. Economists explain why that's worrying. Or in German, 1.2 million Arbeitskräfte gesucht. Basically, we're looking for 1.2 million employees in Germany. Also in the UK, employers are struggling with the worst labor shortage since 1997. And just for the Dutchies below here, the last title, I will not pronounce it because it will sound funny. It says that also in the Netherlands, there's a quite severe labor shortage. That's pretty weird, right? Here in Europe, in many Western countries, we're desperately looking for talent. And at the same time, global unemployment is at a record height. That is a contradiction you wouldn't really expect. So let's dive into the numbers a little bit to try to understand both aspects. You can see it here, global unemployment. It exceeds now 220 million people. I didn't include the source for this result, but you can find it anywhere online. This happens to be from the ILO, International Labour Organization. So you do see a slight decrease in the last year, but still we're far above 200 million, and it's a record number. And of course, as soon as you hear global unemployment, let's say you're not thinking of Europe. Maybe you're thinking of other regions where there's high unemployment for particular reasons. Might be correct, but don't be fooled. You can see it on the right-hand side here. Youth unemployment in Sweden, Italy, Greece, and Spain is above, sometimes even far above, 25%. That's quite staggering and very close by the way. And also for the OECD, the average unemployment rate for highly educated people is still around 4.5%. Of course, 4.5% is not very high, but we're talking OECD countries, so wealthy countries, and very highly, so we're talking tertiary education, very highly educated people here, still 4.5. So yes, global unemployment is probably a regional problem which does not have its emphasis in Europe maybe, but it doesn't mean that it's not here, or it doesn't mean that it's not close by. So it's actually also a problem that we see here, but of course, especially it's a global problem that we're facing. Yes, the presentation will be shared with you after the session. On the other hand, most European countries, as I said, experience labor shortage. So you can see this one image. It's actually a pretty old one from the Boston Consulting Group, but it's nice because basically we're actually now in the middle of this graph. And basically what this tells us is that in Germany, we are now facing or suffering from a labor shortage, which is like 1 to 2 million people. And it's only going to grow for a couple of reasons, mainly aging, of course, the aging working population. And it's going to grow to somewhere between 5.8 and 7.7 million in 2013. That is a massive number and a very strong increase, as you can see this. And it's not only in Germany, of course. It's pretty difficult finding Europe-wide statistics for labor shortages, but of course you can find them for the various countries. You see some other examples on the right-hand side. The Netherlands, 400,000 open vacancies. Might not sound like a lot, but don't overestimate the Netherlands, right? We're super small. And it's actually quite interesting. This number, for the first time, I think, actually in history, this number is higher than the people that are even unemployed in the Netherlands. So even if our unemployment would be at zero, there would still be vacancies. It's quite an interesting statistic. We never reached that point before here in the Netherlands. Now we have. Same goes for Belgium. It's even a little bit smaller than the Netherlands, 200,000 open vacancies. And of course, the UK, much bigger, 1.3 million open jobs, a staggering number. So European countries are experiencing strong labor shortage despite being a lot of people being globally unemployed. So what went wrong, basically? Because of course, governments already tried to solve the issue, especially European governments tried to solve the issue of labor shortage or employers. Well, I see some existing instruments here on this sheet, and basically they've proven either unsuccessful and or insufficient for closing the problem. Open invitation, by the way, you can see that there's a question mark for the last one, this statistic in pink. I'd like to, if anybody has an idea what that instrument would be, please share it in the question or in a comment. Be interested in finding out whether Anyone recognizes the number or basically sees that there's one clear instrument missing from these four that you can read? So the first one is automation. Back in the day, let's say 10 years ago, we all thought that our jobs were going to get lost due to automation, right? Turned out very differently. There's a very low number of people that jobs that were actually lost, or at least the total number of jobs hardly decreased due to automation. Also good, but of course, we thought it might be a nice instrument for decreasing the labor shortage. It turned out not to be at all. Increasing the retirement age, a very important other factor. And on paper, it works perfectly if we can keep those little older people working for another 2-3 years. It'll very much help us in solving our labor shortage. But what have we seen over the last 5 years? That although the legal retirement age indeed did increase in most European countries, the actual retirement age, so the age at which people were actually retiring, still was decreasing. So didn't really work. Up in reskilling then, a lot of focus has been on this for the past 5 years, and although it helps to a certain extent, what you can see is that our labor shortage is actually covering each job profession or each education level. So you might close the gap in a higher education profession when you up or reskill, but you're basically moving the problem only, not really solving it. And the last instrument that you can read about, at least, is of course migration, expat, skilled workers, things like that. Of course, it's a solution, but as you all know, migration, at least in this sense of the word, is rather expensive. And I think even in Germany, there is a statistic provided that we would need at least 400,000 additional migrants, skilled workers, to at least help us a little bit in closing the labor gap. And I can tell you that's an unrealistic number. So the last one, I see, Yasir, thank you for remote hiring. That's not correct though. The last one is increasing female participation. We're in Europe, right? I thought we were all very emancipated by now. It's quite staggering or disappointing to a certain extent to see how big the participation gap between male and females still is. So the 71.6% is basically the gender index for employment, females versus males in Europe. So it includes a couple of different numbers, also pay, but especially participation. And what you can derive from this is that female participation generally is 25% or more lower than those of males. And that can be because of not working at all, but it can also be working below their education level, which is also some kind of unemployment, but also working part-time. I personally was really surprised, maybe even a little bit disappointed. And of course, increasing this number would also really help in closing the labor shortage and closing the gap in Europe. All in all, they've either proven unsuccessful or insufficient. I guess we would need a combination of this. But of course, we're not here today to talk about retirement age too much. This leads to the question, should global remote hiring maybe added to this list? Could this be a new instrument to help European employers in attracting the talent that they basically so desperately need? So that was a little bit of a keynote on this topic with an open question at the end. Reece, may I ask you to right away jump in and share your vision, also Personio's vision on this question right now and maybe what you expect in a couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, I think from our perspective, it's absolutely about finding the right talent. And, as I touched upon earlier, we're going through hyper growth. So the challenge is you're primed for that massive growth, but how do you maintain that growth and maintain that culture? Obviously, the key challenge is hiring enough talent. but it's also about hiring the right talent. And you want the right talent that's going to come in and be a good fit for the company and fit in with the culture and be able to, continue to support that growth, because otherwise it's just growth for growth's sake, and that in the long run is not going to work out. So if you can open up your target market wider and wider to a global network of people with the right skill set, and it just becomes so much easier to kind of to manage that process going forward. So definitely, key attribute for us is finding the right talent and opening up that talent pool as wide as possible.
Bianka, you already said it, right? It was one of your key drivers to actually start looking abroad last year. Can you share some more background on this? Like how big was your pain, or how much is the relief right now?
Yes. So labor shortages, of course, also a very big topic for Everphone, since we are growing so fast, especially in the last year. I think we have hired more than 150 people. Right now we are 216 total, with a very tiny team in HR. So we definitely know how hard it is to attract talents. And yeah, so hiring remotely and from other countries and getting people from a much bigger pool of talents from other countries is so helpful and very important. And also, since we want to expand into other countries and also expand our market in neighborhood countries, but also the US and the UK, it's of course super easy to just have a partner like WorkMotion, so we can just hire them easily abroad without setting up global entities in the countries, without all of the admin pain who is standing behind this. And so we are very happy that we can hire remote and so fast, so that we can grow even faster.
And was this mainly triggered by, so you said you started a year ago, so it feels logical to say that it was triggered by the pandemic, or didn't that really have anything to do with it?
It was also triggered by the pandemic, but mostly we have also set up a very large sales team the year before, like in 2020. So since 2021, we had the main approach that we go international. So that means that since 2021, we just wanted to expand our business. That was the main approach from the beginning. But since 1 or 6 months or up to 12 months, we are also hiring remotely for our business here in Berlin, which means that it's just getting the fast growth was the main approach as well as the expanding.
Exactly. So, and I know that Sophie, you haven't started this process yet. Well, of course, totally justified. It's your decision. What was holding you back so far, and what might be triggers for you to change it and broaden your horizons in that way?
Definitely. I think that's what I actually wanted to say. It's I think the question leads to everyone saying, yes, sure, we want to do it. And then because it seems to be more easy in the first way, and the pandemic kind of opened broad borders and remote working, and we are in a webinar right now and people are watching us from everywhere, right? It seems to be so super easy. But kind of as Reece, Enpal is facing a hypergrowth stage since 2.5 years. So we went from 80 to 1,800 employees in 2.5 years, roughly. So yeah. So what I wanted to say is, we think about it all the time, but also while growing as a company so fast, you have to set up structures, processes, maintain culture. One of the biggest things, which is, yes, challenging when you grow that fast, and growing somewhere all over the planet is even, I would say, more difficult. So we said for us, so we need to concentrate to focus on our core. So, and want to get the growth set in stone, and processes and culture. We want to work on that, and then we think about talent strategy any further. So the pain, I would say, in a hypergrowth phase is not that big yet, but also, as I said in the beginning, we are pretty German-focused company. So German customers, so end consumers. I'm talking about Lieselotte Müller, right, or Heinz Gerd, who is a house owner in Germany. They're usually not able to speak English. And then we also have the construction people in Germany also. So we are also kind of limited right now. But if we're thinking about further extensions in the future, yeah, it will change probably, definitely.
I understand now why so many other employers in Germany have a labor shortage, basically, because you all you attracted all those people. That is insane growth, obviously. I guess, Reece, with Personio, you've gone down that road a little bit longer already, still experiencing super fast growth. And from what I got from you earlier, it seems like you've already taken the next step in that basically, maturity curve, if you will, where you said, well, we're definitely already looking abroad, but also you still have a focus more or less on, at least after some time, relocating them to Germany, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So as I touched upon, it won't necessarily be Germany. So we've got our 5 offices in, 5 permanent establishments in Europe now. So it can be any one of those offices. But I mean, generally, from our perspective, in terms of managing compliance, it's certainly easier to have those people in country long term when it comes to managing, share plans and benefit schemes and stuff like that. So it's definitely a key consideration for us. But yeah, we have had numerous cases this year, and we'll continue to have remote workers who are outside of those countries on a permanent or long-term basis, where they're the right fit for the company. So it's just trying to find that balance, and that differs team to team. Some teams completely embrace remote working and utilize it a lot. There are teams that have absolutely no remote workers, just based upon what they're doing. So it's very much a balance, but the teams are empowered to make the right decision to get the right people and the right skill sets in for them to support that growth in a sustainable way.
So do I understand correctly that you do have some fully remote people, or not at all?
Yes, yeah, no. So about 10% of the workforce is fully remote, and of them, most are in countries where we have, a legal entity anyway. But there are also people outside of that model as well.
So, and there's a question. It's directed at Sophie, but I think it's probably better suited for you, Reece. It's how do you manage the employment contracts then for this 10%, which are based in various countries around Europe, maybe even outside?
Yes, I mean that's a process that we have been through and simplified recently to make it less complicated, because you can really get into the weeds with it, and you're working out where people are living and working out kind of what's the cost of living in this particular place and what should the salary range be. And in the end, we really stripped it back to a far more simplified approach of having remote salary ranges based upon the roles and in the country, and it's as simple as that. So it takes a lot of the admin burden from our side out in terms of trying to work out what that does, and in most cases, obviously, where people are fully remote, they recognize that it's a competitive rate, and to support the fact they can live from home or live far out of the expensive cities where we're often based. So it makes a big difference to them, and it doesn't add too much complexity from our side.
Yeah, really good. Thank you. So thanks for the question. Maybe I hope I pronounce your name correctly. We at WorkMotion, by the way, have the same issue. Not really. We see it as an opportunity. We are a fully flexible, fully remote company. We do technically have an office. It would definitely not fit all of our employees, which are in, I think by now, 40 plus countries, also experiencing hyper growth. And we're basically in the business of, enabling our clients to hire all around the world. Well, the key aspect, if you look at remote contracts, is that very important that contract will be governed by the labor law regulations, mainly of the country where this remote employee sits. So you'll definitely need some local knowledge around that. Of course, also taxation and social security is going to take place in that country. So you'll need some local knowledge and or documentation. You don't necessarily need your own entity. You can either register as a global employer in the country, or you can like use a third party for it, such as WorkMotion to hire remotely for long term, but also for the short term to just test things out. So there are various options there. Bianca, maybe more operational. So a year ago, you decided, yeah, let's do it, right? We'll broaden our horizons. We'll hire somewhere in the US. How did that go? Also, the sourcing. How did that work? What was your experience?
Okay, so we have found our first employee that we hired by WorkMotion. He's actually German, but he moved to the US, so he could handle everything. He can, so he's half American and half German, so that was pretty easy for us in the end. But of course, like operational, it's like you're saying, all of the tech stuff and all of the regulations in the different countries, it's like something that we cannot even handle here from Germany. And there are so many exceptions. So this is something that we definitely needed to outsource. And even though we have set up a legal entity now in the US, this is still, those people are still managed by WorkMotion. Since even though you're having set up the entity, you still need someone in HR over there who handles all of the social security stuff, the tech stuff, the regulations, which is like too much work only for a really small office. And so this is why we definitely decided, or that was from the beginning, the approach that we are sourcing this out, like from day one.
Okay. Great, thank you. So, Sophie, you haven't hired, let's say, remotely yet, but I see a question here. It says, which industries suffer the most from worker shortage? And I know the statistics behind it, but I would like also to ask you, like, I assume, or maybe let's agree that at some point with your speed of growth, no way that you can really source your people from Germany alone. What would be the first, let's say, type of employee that you think you'd have to hire remotely because you simply can't find them in Germany anymore?
Would be probably construction workers. Since we actually started with our own construction company, so we started with Enpal 2017 and started building up our own construction company beginning of 2020, end of 2019, kind of ish. So we think about how to deal with that. So, but what is the Enpal way of thinking, right? It's always like we do not find the right talent. If we have any recruiters here, from the hiring managers, they have a list of requirements and they need a person who fills all the requirements, right? So that's why a lot of companies do not find the right people. So maybe switch the way of thinking. How can you modify the job that you find the right people for the job? Right? So it's always about finding the right talent. Yeah, for sure. We all want to find the right people for your company, but maybe try to switch how you think. Developers, it's always hard. Tech people, I know, I see Melissa. Yeah, it's also hard. But what we do at Enpal is how can we change jobs and how can we make actually the learning and the onboarding phase that, for example, not like a skilled construction worker or like a person who has installed solar systems before. How can we teach a person who just has like some skills like me? I like to build stuff and right now and I'm able to go on the roof. How can we teach those people to install a solar system?
Yeah, super insightful. And of course, if you can source them remotely, but then you'd have to bring them to the work location anyway. That's comes with this job. And that's, Teresa, thank you for your question, is by the way, also what you see in the statistics. Mainly like construction and production people, that there's a very big shortage there on the one hand. And indeed, you can see it in the comments. Developers. Everything that's, let's say, STEM and tech related is there's also a massive shortage. Doesn't say that there aren't shortages in basically any other profession. You can definitely see an emphasis for indeed people in construction and the likes, or people in tech. And that's also what we see at WorkMotion. Our clients mainly are early adopters of global remote hiring, and they are sourcing techies all around the world for now. Of course, you'll see a shift. There are many jobs that you can do remotely, but you see the highest urgency for this type of professions, basically. Reece, I saw you shouting out yes. Is that also what you experienced at Personio?
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly when it comes to software developers, we've got so much going on in terms of developing the product, the integrations we have, the customizable workflows, all of the different add-ons, payroll and recruiting. There's just enormous demand for people, and local markets just cannot fill it. It's super competitive. So by opening that pool out again, as I said earlier, open the pool out as wide as possible, cast that net as wide as possible for the best people. Certainly useful for us in filling those gaps.
Thank you very much. So I see a couple of questions. I think those are very interesting also for you, Reece and Bianca, to answer. Because of course we've now focused on, well, wow, isn't it great to source remotely, to hire remotely? Of course, we're basically, it's a great opportunity, not only to close your labor shortage gap, but also to increase diversity within the company. There could also be cost savings related to it. And even if you open up your talent pool to the global talent pool, it's not just about fulfilling a vacancy. You can probably even find someone who does the job better for the particular vacancy. So you'd even increase productivity. So there's opportunities around global remote hiring. I guess we agree. But if we look at this round, definitely not everybody is doing it. And that's obviously because there's also a lot of complexity around it. And I see two aspects already being popping up in the questions. Thank you, by the way, for so many questions. And they are about pay. So what salary to offer to remote hires, and company culture. Bianca, may I ask you to give your view on both aspects before Reece does?
Yes, so especially when it comes to company culture, so I have to say that at Everphone, our company culture is very, very office intense, and not because we force people into the office, of course, so everyone can work remotely whenever and wherever they want to. But yeah, people just love to come into the office. We have big offices in Berlin. We also set up one in Munich, one in the US. So this is like our current culture, and yeah, we also don't want to change that in the future, but just to have the possibility to hire people remotely, especially when it has to be so fast. So because our hiring manager, they don't want to have people in half a year when we have taken care of their visa or something, or in a couple months. So they want them tomorrow, and that is something that yeah, we need a sparring partner for. And yeah, but especially to go back to the culture part, I think that is something that is lacking from my perspective when you're hiring remotely, or you have to change your culture completely. Since it's also like when it comes to benefits, which is also one part of the culture. Yeah, we have benefits only available in Germany. So what are you doing with people around the world? So you would have to find sparring partners there too. This is definitely some things to consider, and things that are like a little bit of barriers, I would say. When it comes to pay, the second one, then I'd say that we, of course, in Germany, since we are experts in the German labor market or the German labor law, we definitely don't know what is the average pay for a developer, for example, in other countries like in China and India or wherever. So this is something where we, of course, are very, very happy when we have an expert or a partner on the hand who just can tell us, okay, this is like a competitive salary, what we could offer.
Thank you. Reece, also very keen in hearing especially the culture part for international or remote teams. That's a massive issue, I guess, but also pay levels is something very interested to hear from you.
Yeah, I mean, if I start with culture, obviously it's something that's very difficult to maintain when you have a remote workforce and you don't have that face-to-face contact. And we do go to great lengths to try and support maintaining that culture across our remote workforces as much as possible. So businesses are encouraged to support remote workers come into the office at least, once a quarter to spend time with the team. And where we can, we try and, build that around culture events and, team social events, just so they have that time to have like some fun face-to-face time with the team they're working with as well. We try and make sure that all meetings that we have are remote friendly and remote first. So even if a lot of the team are in the office, they're all on individual cameras, so you still feel like you're part of the discussion and integrated in that. But it's definitely a worry, and you just do what you can to protect it. Recognizing that remote working is, I think we would probably agree, here to stay. So you have to find ways around that and balance that culture. And part of it comes down to the interview process as well, where we do have a kind of culture or values interview with people as well, to somebody from outside of their business unit to see how they would be a fit. So hopefully they feel part of the culture from day one. When it comes to pay, that's also a difficult thing to manage. Obviously, a lot of the time we're talking about going into markets where you don't have any exposure. So we do have external data sources that will tell us what a kind of salary range for a particular role would be in a particular country, which is obviously very useful. And that's also something I know WorkMotion supports with as well, in terms of giving us guidelines as to what we can expect a salary range might be for a role, so we can make sure that we're competitive and kind of on the market trend in a particular country where we maybe don't have the expertise or the knowledge of that beforehand.
Yeah, thank you. Well, indeed, on the WorkMotion platform, there is an integration to, let's say, a benchmark database. That's always a good help to at least get a little bit of feeling whether you are like in the green area around payment. And another tool that can help you with it, of course, is a cost of living index. Simply looking at the cost of living in the particular country compared to the cost of living in your own country. Take your own country salary for that role and basically do the math and find out what would be the basis in that location. Corrected on the basis of what Reece just said on basically the benchmarking information, and you may have a good starting point. I was actually writing something about this yesterday evening. We see so many employers, HR people struggling with this. There is no true solution, right? Maybe it's even the beauty of working with people. Each competitive offer is 100% tailor-made and unique, and it's always also a little bit ambiguous. You never know whether you're paying too much, too little, and I guess especially because we're now at the beginning of this journey, and you see remote hiring in only a very few number of particular professions like developers. I guess pay levels are also being stretched left to right, up top to bottom, very drastically right now. I guess we don't really have too much experience, too little data to really make estimated or well guessed offers. It's not going to really change, but we'll get better as we grow. I think that's my experience with this. So thank you for this question also. Of course, there's other barriers to hiring remotely. Sophie, you already said, well, part of our workforce simply cannot work remotely. That's a clear barrier. I guess you're not really looking for opportunities to really change that, but there's a question on another pretty obvious barrier, which is language. You already mentioned it too. What is your, let's say, vision, how that's going to evolve in general, but especially, of course, for Enpal?
Definitely, I think it's kind of special with a company who is so based on the German market. I think it's one of the biggest things we have to clarify within our culture, because we have people who are just able to speak German and we have people who are just able to speak English. So this is a huge challenge for the culture while growing company, how to deal with it. So in the future, we see ourselves with one big culture, but the main company is English speaking, so the headquarter, but we will have some subcultures. So because our construction company is totally different than, for example, our headquarter, where mostly high skilled workers are working, right? I don't want to but it's how you say it, like low skilled, high skilled, right? It just feels like also kind of offending the people, but let's call it blue and white color. I like it maybe better. So it's totally different for us, and it's one of our biggest questions we haven't answered. And I think it's fine that you do not have an answer to everything, right? It's on the one side, how Bianka said with the benefits. If you have a fruit basket, like let's talk about the typical startup benefit. Do you buy an apple for the people who sit in Spain a day then? It's sometimes about the little questions till, or also on the other hand, the big contract pay, social security, tax, and then the ones you can't really measure, or it's even harder, culture, team building. What do you do when you do a summer party, right? Do you give them like money to go party in their country? So how do you deal with those questions? I think the big question is, yes, sure, it's one thing for the future, but all the things which come with it, getting the people perspective even more complex. And I think most of the people teams, I don't want to offend anybody, but as well as we're not fully ready for that because we haven't dealt with it yet, but it's totally fine. Let's try it out to how to deal with it and what kind of obstacles are coming and even fail. Like, right, you can try to hire remote and say, okay, that doesn't work for us as a company. And then you're not just a bad company. Then you just have to find a way how to deal with it with not hiring people from different countries or in different countries.
Thank you. And it like a great bridge to a question that I see popping up. When is the best time to switch from using a third party like WorkMotion to registering as a global employer, or like maybe setting up your own entity somewhere? Because I think especially WorkMotion is a great tool for like testing out remote hiring. Indeed, Sophie, you can try it out and maybe you feel you come to the conclusion it doesn't work for us. Bianka, how do you see that going forward? So far you've like hired through WorkMotion, expanding pretty quickly with Everphone globally. When do you think that Everphone will like establish its own entities, like as we know from Reece, Personio already did in some jurisdictions?
I think that we do this as soon as we are big enough in other countries. So because, for example, in the US, as I said, we already have our own entity, but our employees are still employed by WorkMotion since we are focusing on growth there right now. So we need all of the people we have to just like take care of the sales and take care of the growth. So this is something as soon as they are big enough over there, we will definitely also have our own HR department over there and can set up everything in regards to this. But I think that in all the other countries where we don't have entities so far, I think that we have to see, how is the business paying off in the other countries? How fast are we growing? So how successful are we in other countries? And as soon as we have like the base over there, then we say, okay, now it's time. But I don't think that there is like one special, I don't know, we're not saying, okay, as soon as we have 10 people in that country, then we start hiring by ourselves. So I think that is a question that is still in the future being answered.
Thank you. Reece, is that like more or less the process that, like, for as far as you know, and know you haven't been with Personio for too long yet, but is that the process that your company also like has gone through?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with what Bianca said. You test out a market, you find out, how things develop and grow. There will be signs there. We will have clients across Europe, and maybe as we start to see more clients in a particular country, okay, we need to start, having people on the ground so we can, service our customers properly and have some of that face-to-face interaction. And then at some point, you don't want to put the cart before the horse and set up a permanent establishment there if nothing's going to come of it. But there will be a groundswell and there will be a point at which it makes sense for you to make that switch. And what that will look like will differ from team to team and company to company. But in general, I think when you're ready, you'll know that, okay, we have enough of, established business practice here that it makes sense for us to, make more permanent inroads into that country. So
exactly. Perfect. Thank you. So last question from my end before I see still some questions popping up in the Q&A. Thank you very much for that. just a little bit of a long-term perspective on like how your company is going to look like in, oh, let's say 10 years from now. Sophie, I guess your company will never be fully remote, but well, first, I'd be very interested in hearing from you how many people you think Enpal will employ in 2030, so to say, and to what extent will you have, well, an international workforce, a remote workforce? What do you think like will happen over the next 8 to 10 years?
Mm, I wish I would knew that, and I think also CEO Mario or everyone would be like a genius if we would know how we would look and how big we would be by then. I think we have a huge ambitious goal to change the energy market into a renewable energy market, right? We have super ambitious goals to put over a few million solar panels on roofs. So we have a lot still to do, and I think for like some things you can automate, right? But the solar system installation you can't. So we need a lot of workers for that. We have a few like departments where we just can scale over workforce. And then I would say we do already have 140 people roughly who are working completely remote within Germany. So we already have that, but not outside due to compliance and all this kind of stuff. And this was just during the pandemic. So I think we will probably be by then in different countries. So we will probably have then a few people working from a different country also for the German side. And the headquarter is my vision. But I still think that we won't have a person sitting somewhere on the totally different side of the country where we do not have an entity. Not permanently. This would be the guess I would go with.
Yeah, so there's going to be massive change, but not to the extent that, yeah, you're like all around the globe. I can imagine that. Thank you. Bianca, what do you think for Everphone?
Yeah, so right now I don't see it coming, to be honest. Yeah, in this case, our culture would have to change completely. And also what I probably didn't mention before, but yeah, we're having huge warehouses since I mean, our core business is to rent out phones and tablets. So this is something, I don't know, probably there are other technologies in a couple of years where we can do this fully remote, but right now we are working close with our warehouses, and yeah, so right now it's hard to imagine that we are going fully remote, to be honest. Like,
I can imagine. Reece, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting time to ask this question as well, because I don't know if anyone saw in the UK last week, but a senior government minister visited the office of some civil servants that he knew were working from home, and he left a rather passive-aggressive post-it note on their desk to say, "Sorry, I missed you. Look forward to seeing you when you're back in the office." And it didn't go down particularly well, even in his own party. But I think it speaks to the kind of split opinions as to people have when it comes to remote working. But from our perspective, I think we've already kind of struck towards our balance. We understand the value of remote working in terms of attracting the right employees and moving into new locations, but we also make significant investment in our physical spaces in our offices, making sure that they are places that people want to be and good social environments for people to work. So I don't see our model significantly changing. The numbers in terms of percentages may ebb and flow a little bit, but I think we've probably roughly struck the balance that we have. So unless anything significant changes in the next few years, then I think we're pretty much there. So
Thank you for that. So for WorkMotion, obviously, we are already entirely more or less remote, and I don't think that's going to change. I personally predict a massive change over the next 10 years, but the future will indeed be hybrid. It brings us to the end of this seminar. Should global remote hiring be added to this list? I guess the answer is in German, Jein, right? It's yes and no. I don't think there are going to be a lot of companies in 8 or 10 years from now that are entirely remote. I doubt whether a lot of people will be working from Mars. Maybe one or two, you never know. You'd have to bring your wallet probably. But But I also doubt whether there is at least like one company even in Europe that in 10 years from now has not hired someone remotely at all. And I guess what we will see is everything in between with a parabolic curve. So you'll see a lot of companies really mixing it up to a certain extent. What we already see with basically the companies represented in this webinar. And I guess, well, definitely looking at the growth of these companies, probably we're talking to some early adopters when it comes to this. So they've already made a move, but it's also clear that to a certain extent, they're conservative. So remote hiring, like remote work and hiring, it is not for all, and it doesn't have to be. It's totally fine. You can see some statistics that I still wanted to share with you. So as I said, 25% of unemployed people in some European countries are highly educated or are very young. I'm sorry, they're not maybe also highly educated, but they're young. Already a portion of these people can make a massive adjustment. Same goes with these 4.5% OECD people who are highly educated. Can be a very big adjustment. But there are some more staggering statistics. If you look, let's say, a little bit broader. In India and I think Brazil alone, there are 3 million STEM graduates, unemployed people between the age of 23 and 30 or so who are unemployed right now and that do have a bachelor's degree. 3 million people. We're talking about 1 or 2% that can make a very significant change here in Europe if we hire them remotely. And this 16 times is the statistic for the number of STEM graduates in, I think, China and India alone. It's 16 times higher than the number of STEM graduates in Germany and the UK combined. 16 times. Like it's not even like it doesn't even sound real. You cannot really make it like concrete. So much bigger is that number. And think of how much impact it can have if a small portion of those people would actually be working remotely for your company in Europe. So when you would like to hire remotely, of course, we've already talked a little bit about WorkMotion, how we can help with that. What I think is very nice of the integration with Personio, and I'll hand over to Reece to especially answer the last question that had a lot of votes on the integration. WorkMotion makes it basically possible to hire all around the globe in 160 plus countries, either through an EOR solution or through a direct employment solution. So various solutions. With Personio, I think the main ambition is to make the employee and the HR experience similar to as if you're hiring in your backyard. And that's what the integration is also about. Reece, can you maybe share some more about that and then close up the webinar?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, so at the moment, obviously, as I say, when we have candidates come through the portal and we realize we need to support them via an employer of record arrangement, it's fantastic having the integration from a global mobility team point of view, because we're able to pull a lot of that individual's data, or most of the individual's data, from Personio directly into WorkMotion via just the employee reference number, which then pre-fills all the data, which means that we don't have to spend time doing the administrative tasks in terms of filling that in. So that's a big time saver for us. And in terms of the question I saw in the group, hopefully that integration will continue to grow and develop as well, so you can track the time, days off, etc. in Personio, and that will flow through to WorkMotion automatically. In terms of our integrations, just to touch upon very quickly, we did big shout out to our integrations team because we hit 100 integrations yesterday. So a nice milestone for us, and due to the hard work of the team. And I guess, none of this is particularly ground changing. It's saving 10 minutes here, 15 minutes here on a lot of the administrative tasks that, a lot of HR people in this conversation will be familiar with. And the hope is if you can save those 10, 15 minutes here and there, that adds up to then giving you the ability to focus on strategic questions like, what is our international hiring approach going to be? And then if we have that partnership at the end of that integration process with WorkMotion, and it takes the stress out of the international hiring and thinking about all of those compliance things, then all the better for that as well. So I think from our side, we've pretty much hit the time limit, haven't we? So I guess if anyone has any questions relating to WorkMotion or Personio, you can get in touch with Pieter or I, and we'd be happy to help. From my side, I just want to extend our thanks to Bianka and Sophie as well for coming along and sharing your experiences. Thanks to Pieter for his expertise and for setting the scene so well in terms of remote working, a topic I know he's very passionate about. So thank you for that. And thank you to everyone for joining us. And I hope the session was of use for you.